Today we are going to be tier ranking every single villain in Marvel Champions, the card game. Now, we haven't done this in a while, and I thought it'd be good to do it because we're getting a new big box soon, which will add more villains to the game, and then we could do this again down the line. But there's currently 35 villains, I believe, in the game, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of go over them. We're not going to spend a ton of time on each one, but go over each one a little bit and tier rank it. That'll be a lot of fun, so let's jump over to the screen. So I've broken down my tiers to love them, like them a lot, or like a lot, not bad, randomly may play, and not a fan, right? So that, I figured this would be a nice way to balance it. This is kind of how we did our heroes one in the past as well. So we're just going to kind of go, it's mostly in alphabetical order. There might be a few that are off. Like, for example, Band of Badoon, I put Drang instead, so it rated it lower. But roughly, these are in alphabetical order. We'll go through each one, talk a little bit about it. And yeah, let's start with Absorbing Man, who I know Absorbing Man gets a lot of hate because he's so simple and he's really easy, and I get it, he is, but on expert he could be all right. It's one I won't play as much. I don't think he's a good like testing villain or anything like that, so it's not something I will test a lot of decks off of, but it's not that I'm not a fan of him. I just think he's fine, right? I just think he's fine. So Absorbing Man, randomly may play. Next up is Collector 1. I'm not a fan of Collector 1. I don't find anything about the design fun. I don't think the collection was built well for solo playing, because basically I don't get why his cards enter the collection, right? That's the part that doesn't make sense, and they fixed this later on in the X-Men box. But his cards shouldn't enter the collection. That's weird. Like, he already has his cards. Why would his cards go in the collection, right? It's a better design if it's just your cards that leave play. It's more interesting. It's more fun. I really don't like the design of Collector 1. Now, Collector 2, on the other hand, and I don't think I got these artworks confused. I think this is. But I'll randomly play him. I like it more than Collector 1. I think he's a little more interesting, but it's basically how much can you thwart and how fast, right? Instead of creating like a rush attack deck, you create a rush thwart deck. And yeah, you could do some attack, which will flip him and I believe remove some threat as well. So there's like some strategy there with that. It's fine, right? It's fine. It feels like it plays very much the same each time. So it's not one that I'll come back to a lot. And it's not something that you would really ever like test a deck against or see how good a deck is, because it's a very different type of deck that you're playing with this, right? It's a deck that can thwart a ton. And it's something that, like, there are just heroes that it will almost never work out for. Like, Hulk will probably not beat Collector 2 on expert, like, ever. On standard, you could probably make it work with like a shield deck or something like that, but realistically it just wouldn't generally work out. So I'm not a big fan of it, but to me it's better than Collector 1, that's for sure. So next we have Crossbones, who again I'll randomly play, and I think here's the thing, I actually like Crossbones design. I don't like getting out 3 modular sets. I think it's too many. And I know that's like a weird critique, but I feel like I'm just taking out so many and then putting so many back that it's just like just over the line of how many I want to take out. Like 1 and 2 are fine. 3 is just like that little bit too much. So he'll probably be at the top of randomly may play and the bottom of not bad. Maybe we'll move him a little bit, but it's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like, it's this weird thing that every single time I think about playing Crossbones, it's like, oh, I have to take out 3 modular sets for him. Like, nah, it's too much work. And it's just, I know that sounds so weird, but it's a lot, right? Compared to a 2 modular set villain, it's now 50% more modulars, essentially. So anyway, that's my weird thing with Crossbones. I would like to get him to the table more, and I do like his villain design. I do think he's cool and he's hard, he's fun, but 3 is just too many, and I don't know why that's like a thing. All right, next we have Sinister Six, and I know it's up next because I put Doc Ock as the thumbnail, but I like Sinister Six a lot. I think it's a lot of fun scenario. I think it's slowly moving down because other things like Mansion Attack, I think, does roughly the same system a bit better. Now, what makes Sinister Six pretty cool is that you have to be a very well balanced hero. You're trying to escape with light at the end of the tunnel, which is pretty interesting in the way they do it. Like, you're just trying to thwart off the side scheme, I think it is. But you're trying to thwart off the scheme while trying to take out villains, because you can get all of these Sinister Six out there if you're not careful, right? It could be a really difficult scenario in that sense. So like, you're trying to like balance everything out. So it also feels like there's never a wasted turn. I don't know about you all, but sometimes playing solo, I have a turn that's just like, man, this is a really good attack turn, but I have nothing to attack. Or this is a really good thwart turn, I have nothing to thwart. Sinister Six, with the exception of a few things that can pop up, generally speaking, you can attack and or thwart every single turn. Now, again, there are a few situations where you can't, but it's not that often that happens. So I really like this scenario. I think it's a well-balanced scenario. I think it's pretty fun. I think it's thematic. The only sad part is that we still don't have Dr. Octopus as a villain that you can go against. I wish that was a thing. Makes me really sad that's not. So, so I like him a lot. Next up, we have Drang, which is Brotherhood of Badoon, and he's not bad to me. I know a lot of people use Drang as like a test. The problem is, I don't like testing scenarios with the ship that you get, right? Ship command, that modular deck that you get, basically a free resource. I feel like it hurts deck building a lot for like a deck that would be good all around. Like a free resource is huge right out of the gate, right? Like that's insane. That's a lot. So I feel like I don't like Drang for that aspect of deck testing. And then Drang himself, like, is fine if you just hurry up, right? Basically, he's got his counters where he's just going to do indirect damage. So it's just like kind of a timer to like make you rush and go just a little bit faster. He's fine, right? He's fine. He's nothing I love playing, but I think he's all right. I'll play him now and again. I do think on expert he's a more fun challenge because a Drang spear like makes things a little bit more interesting. So I like that aspect of him. But again, it's not this villain that I love, and it's not that the design is bad. It's just it's very safe design. It's a very normal design. It gives you that resource right in the beginning, which I think is like a little too helpful, I guess. I might play Drang more often without playing ship command. That might be more interesting to me. But yeah, he's fine, right? He's fine. He's not bad. All right, next we have Ebony Maw, who again is like a not bad villain. I like the idea of the counters on each of his spells, right? Like you see the spell it's coming and you see the amount of counters are on it. So you know, okay, in 3 rounds, unless a certain treachery card comes out or certain treachery cards come out, that this spell is going to hit me. I think that's cool. And especially when like they slowly build up to like a chain reaction. It's like, okay, I only have to deal with 1 spell. And then it's like, okay, it surges into another spell. Then it surges into another spell. It's like, okay, I have 3 spells, which stinks a lot. But I can handle it, right? For the most part, you can kind of handle it. And this one's going to target in 4 turns, but these 2 are going to target in 3 turns. Like, I like that design mechanic, right? I like the design of like, okay, I know what's coming. Like, I don't know what's coming in the encounter deck. I am not 100% sure what the villain's going to do, but I know these spells, generally speaking, are going to like pop off at a certain time. Now, again, there are treachery cards that make you remove counters, so it could be a little sooner. But still, I think that's a really fun, neat idea. I think Ebony Maw is a little too easy with how it's done because for the most part, you just kind of have to rush them and beat the counters. That's fine, whatever. But I think the design idea is a very good one, right? It's a very strong idea of design. So he's a not bad for me. I don't quite like him a lot, but he's up there. He's up there for sure. I do want to play him more often because I do think he's fun. But yeah, I think he's a fine, I don't want to say generic, but a good, solid, safe design, right? Doesn't take too many risks, and it's kind of neat in the way they approach it. So I am a pretty big fan of Ebony Maw, or I guess not bad. All right, next up we have Hela. And Hela, if you watch my last villain tier list, was my absolute favorite villain of all time, and she's still up there. She's still for sure up there. I really enjoyed the design of Hela. I feel like it's the only design so far, and I don't know if they've tried it yet again, so I don't want to like be like, oh, they tried and they failed. For me, it's the only design that like I truly feel like I'm going through a journey in the game. Right, I really like that design. I think it feels cool. I think it's very thematic, and it's just a lot of fun. Now, what I will say is I've played Hela a lot, and you learn certain patterns with Hela, right? You learn when the time you learn the timing of when to take out the side schemes, the minion, and her, right? Because there are certain times you want to do things because side schemes will trigger her to flip or whatever. So you want to time all that out perfectly, and you want to set yourself up. There is like a proper way to play her, and if you do that, you'll generally be pretty good, especially on standard. On standard, she's kind of not a pushover, but she's very straightforward and easy on standard. On expert, I still struggle with her because her stat line's a bit tougher and it's harder to deal with this stuff, and you kind of have to rush at the end. It's more interesting, I think. And expert brings something else to the table with her, so I like that a lot. But with her design, I still think it's so unique. It's so fun, even though now I I just I get the design. Like, even though now, like, I get it and like I know what I should be doing, it's still fun. I still think it's fun and interesting. And it just shows how strong their design is with Hela, in my opinion. I hope they do something like Hela again. Again, I don't want them to overuse the design of like the journey mechanic, basically. You fight this side scheme, you go to the next one, you go to the next one. I don't want them to overuse that or anything, but I do think I would like them to use it again at some point, because it's been a little while, and I think it'd be really cool and really fun. But I love Hela still. She's still a villain I will play often, and I don't know. I still think the design in that is absolutely wonderful, and the expert side of her is really, really tough, really, really hard. So next up we have Kang, who, if you know me, I'm not a fan of Kang. I know a lot of people love Kang, and I know I've just talked about this whole journey thing and whatever. Kang was like the original iteration of that when you fight multiple instances of the villain, and I think it's more fun in a multiplayer setting, right? Where multiplayer that stage, I think it's 2, if I remember correctly, that breaks into many different Kangs and then you come back together. I think for multiplayer, that's a lot more fun, right? I deal with this Kang, you deal with that Kang, and like, I get it. I get it from that aspect. As a solo player, okay, like, it's just I fight 3 versions of Kang. Like, it's a long fight. It loses something in there with that, and I'm just not a big fan of it. I just don't enjoy Kang. Again, I think if you play 3, 4 player Marvel Champions, this is probably one of your favorite scenarios because it is a pretty cool mechanic and how it works. In solo, it's not for me. So I've played Kang somewhat recently, I think, on stream, maybe like a month or 2 now, and like, it was all right. Like, it was fine doing it that one time, but after I finished, I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't want to play Kang again for quite some time. So that's kind of how I feel about him. I'm just not a fan. Now and again, if you are a part of the live streams on Twitch or here on YouTube, I'll use marbles, and if it randomly comes up, okay, not the worst thing in the world, but it's not something I really want to do a lot. So anyway, Kang, not a fan. The next up we have Klaw, who I like his design a lot. It's a much older design, and I think Klaw is still a great hero to test decks against. Now, for Marvel Champions, I'm not a big fan of testing decks because I don't think it works as well as we would like it to, because the villain design is so unique and different from villain to villain that it's very, very hard to test a deck against one villain and have it correlate to another villain like super well. Like, it might a little bit if it's the same roughly idea villain, right? There are certain villains that are kind of not the same, but like the idea is the same. Klaw is still a very well balanced, well designed villain. I like him. He can still put up a decent challenge without feeling like unfair. Expert Klaw, I think, is a lot of fun. Still very, very hard. You have to play very well against him, which I think is a good design, right? Standard should be not easy, but you should be able to get a pretty decent win rate against them. Expert's a pretty tougher win rate. I like that they were able to balance that really well with Klaw. I still think Klaw is just such a well-balanced villain, and it shows how well-balanced the game is as a whole, that you can come back to core box villains and go, oh, this is still hard in a challenge, but a fair challenge, right? A lot of times in most of these games, when you go back to core box stuff with like the larger card pool, it's really, really easy. Like Arkham Horror and Lord of the Rings kind of have this problem where it's just very, very easy. Marvel Champions, yes, Klaw is probably easier, but he's not easy. You know what I mean? So anyway, Klaw, I still like his design a lot. I still like to play him a lot. I think he's a lot of fun, but he'll probably be at the bottom of this list. All right, next up we have Loki, who I want to like Loki. I think Loki, we'll get into more of this with Ronan, that a lot of people think Ronan was the worst design that's out there. I think Loki is. I'm going to be honest. I think Loki is their worst design. The problem with Loki is that you have a version of Loki, right? And he's a whatever stat line. Each one's a little bit different, but not much. They have 20 life. Okay. After you beat a Loki, you just have to beat another Loki. And if you're playing expert, you just have to beat another Loki. And if you're playing heroic, you just have to beat another Loki. And it just gets boring, right? It just gets boring. You're just doing the same exact thing over and over and over. I think if you take out the Infinity Gauntlet, Loki's design is a bit more interesting, But for example, this card in itself is a 2/2 stat line on standard. You have to add the Infinity Gauntlet, which makes it a 3/3 villain on standard. There's no reason that Loki should be 3/3 on standard, right? That's kind of nuts. That's kind of insane. I mean, that's like Ronan numbers. So, and then there's Lokis out there that have a 3 attack line, so it'd really be attacking for 4 or scheming for 4, right? Like it's not it's just not fun. I think it's the best way to put it. I think the other issues with Loki is that the modular sets they recommend are really bad. And now I don't mind tough modular sets, but what I mean is when you defeat a Loki, you have to discard from the encounter deck until a side scheme is discarded. Okay, fine. His deck, I think, comes with 4 or 5 side schemes and starts with one of them in play. And like for the rest of them, there's like 1 or 2. Like there's only like 5 or 6 side schemes in the entire encounter deck with how they recommend it. So you're just on, especially expert, just plowing through his encounter deck to get like more acceleration tokens. That's not fun or interesting, right? Like you're just like, okay, he gets to like go through his entire deck now because I happen to get a bad draw, right? And then okay, I beat a Loki, and then oh wait, I already had all the side schemes out again, or most of them, and now they're all on the bottom, right? Like that design is just not interesting. It's not fun. I still, my theory, and this is just theory, I don't know if it's true or not, but they designed the Infinity Gauntlet with Thanos in mind. It makes a lot of sense with Thanos. He's a lot of fun. He's super thematic. They obviously spent a lot of time on the Infinity Gauntlet because it's really well done. I think it's really well balanced. They really thought things through. It's awesome. And then they went through all the villains. They went, oh, we only put it on one villain. We should probably just slap it on Loki. Like that's what it feels like, because it doesn't feel like it's well balanced with Loki. It feels kind of cheap. Nothing feels good about it, right? It just doesn't feel good. Loki doesn't feel good. It's an annoying villain. It's not even annoying. It's just boring. Like I don't mind annoying. It's boring. Loki is a boring villain, and it's just one I just don't enjoy playing because again, you're just kind of going through the same motion over and over and over and over, and that's just not fun or enjoyable. So, anyway, Loki, not a fan. Probably, I put him lower than the Collector 1. He's like right there. You could flip these two. I don't know which way I would go, but you could definitely either or. It doesn't matter. They're both down there together. All right, next up we have Magneto, who from Loki was my least favorite, probably final boss of like a box. Magneto is probably my most favorite. I love Magneto. I like the whole system where he starts off with steady and not stalwart. I think that's interesting twist because stalwart seemed to be on a lot of things. A lot of like hard bosses they would put stalwart on. He has steady, and then you're like slowly working on removing steady from the game, right? With like the side scheme deck that you're going through, and it's kind of like they're trying to do the Hela thing where it's like a journey. It doesn't feel quite as good as Hela does, but I still like the idea. And as you go through at the very end, like he loses steady, right? And that's, if you're playing solo, that's kind of your rush, is to get through his side scheme deck as fast as possible and then stun or confuse him, right? That's your rough idea for Magneto. But still, it doesn't, even with knowing the strategy, it's really hard, right? It's still really hard, but it's a fair hard. And this is what I really like about Magneto, is that we'll talk about certain villains that you play against. Like it just feels cheap, right? It doesn't feel like the game is giving you a fair shot at it. Magneto feels very fair. It feels like they did a really good job of balancing out like his treacheries and how he works and everything like that. He's hard but fair, and that's to me the best way to explain Magneto. I don't mind hard villains as long as they seem fair, and Magneto to me is the best example of this. So he's a villain I love playing. I absolutely love playing him. Even though, again, not that I've solved him. I don't think I've really solved him, but I've figured out the best way to approach him. And whether that approach works or not is always fun to see. So Magneto, definitely a love and villain. Lower than Hela, but might, get up there at some point. All right, next we have Magog, who, I like him. Like, I like his whole hero, or his, cheer counter system. Like, I think that's fun. I think it's not bad. Like, he's right in between the two here of not bad and I like a lot. I'll put him up here for now. I like the system. I think it's kind of cool. I do think it becomes this game where either you're rushing him a lot or you're just doing a protection deck, like a perfect defense protection deck. That's kind of what it feels like it falls into the most, like for the most part, right? Like that's kind of what I'm doing with Magog each time. So that part gets like a little bit boring. So I feel like he's slowly falling down the list because of that. But like he's fine. He's interesting. He's fun and for sure. But I do think he's getting a little bit stale because again, it's just all right. Play him in the perfect protection deck is your best chance, or you just have to rush faster than him. Like that's really the two strategies that seem to work the best. So I like his design. I think it's interesting. I like that they did it. I think it's good in that sense. But I think I'm getting a little bored of him because I've played a lot of Magog. All right, next up is Mansion Attack, where Mansion Attack is like it's like Sinister Six, but I do think it's better. Oh no, wait, go the other way. There we go. I do think it's a little bit better. And this is a picture of Blob in case people are wondering, like, why is that signifying Mansion Attack? It's a little picture of Blob. I do think that the side scheme thing they have going on where like it affects everyone, right? Like there'll be cards where certain cards give +1 attack to all characters, and this includes minions and the villain. I think that's a really cool design. I think that's really fun. I think that's really neat. So I'm a fan of that. I like that, the way that they approach that. So yeah, Mansion Attack I like a lot. I think it's a little bit better than Sinister Six, which I like a lot too. But yeah, definitely high up there. A lot of fun. Next up, we have Master Mold. And Master Mold's like, he's fine, right? He's fine. I don't love Master Mold. I think the idea of him having Stalwart is cool. And the Sentinel minions coming out and giving, what is it, guard, basically. So that if there's a minion, you have to deal with the minion. The problem with Master Mold is it gives you Magneto ally. And Magneto ally, I think, is just too strong. I think Magneto ally is just a little bit too good, especially for solo, right? It's just getting that ally out there who's really strong, who heals up after he takes out a minion. Just a little too good, right? It makes the scenario a little bit too easy. I think without Magneto, it's a much more difficult scenario, and maybe that's the way to play it in the future. But yeah, as of now, it's just a little too easy, So I'm not. It's not bad, right? It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. With Mojo, who's up next, I know people like Mojo's like mechanics and how he works and whatnot. I think he's all right. Like I don't think he's great. I don't think he's bad or anything, but I think he's all right. Is the best way I can put it with Mojo. I feel like I'm just rushing Mojo a lot because you don't want him to go through his deck and get more, or like the whole spinning wheel and not spinning. Like you don't want that to happen. And he's kind of just thinning out the deck faster and faster and faster. So you're just rushing Mojo for the most part. Seems to be a pretty strong strategy and works pretty well, even on expert. And like he doesn't really attack you for a ton, right? So you don't want to flip down. So it just feels kind of weird. Like he just doesn't. Like you have to manage scheme, right? Because he can take scheme off of you or off of a ally or something like that and put it on the main scheme. So you have to watch for that. But as long as you're doing okay there, like you just rush him, right? That's really the strategy with Mojo is you're just kind of rushing him, which just I don't know, it's just not that fun or that interesting. I feel like he's the worst of that pack for me personally, and I know a lot of people like his design, and it's fine. I'm not judging the design a ton, but it just I don't know. I never really get the urge or whatever to play against Mojo. So anyway, he's not bad. Next up, we have Mutant Formula. I love Mutant Formula. It's a very strong challenge. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's really cool. I like Mutant Formula. I like what they did with Green Goblin. I really like Green Goblin as a villain. I think Green Goblin is a lot of fun. But yeah, it's a scenario. I think it's always been ranked near the top for me, and I think we'll continue to because it's a very well balanced scenario. It's very well put together. It's well done. Really enjoy it. So yeah, not Magneto. I just looked at Magneto. So Green Goblin, definitely love him. Lower than Magneto. He's definitely going to be probably at the end of the love them list. Then we have Nebula, who okay, so here's the thing. On the last tier list, I had that I really liked Nebula, and I did. And I played a lot more Nebula, and I started playing Nebula Expert. I hate Nebula Expert. With a burning passion. I do not like the techniques and how it's only one. And then if you get just like a randomly bad draw and just surges from one technique to another technique to another technique to another technique, it's basically game over, right? Because you're just removing one each round, but like 4 or 5 bad things are happening to you each round. It's frustrating. So she used to be way up there. She is now, she's now on the bottom. I can't anymore. I can't handle randomness like that. Back in the day, I didn't mind it because we had so few villains and whatever. I can't stand the randomness now because I want to be able to go in with a strategy that I know will have a chance of working, and it doesn't matter what your strategy is. If you get a bad draw, you're done. That's all that matters. So that kind of really stinks. I really don't enjoy that about Nebula, and she has just plummeted off my list. Plummeted. I want to like her, but I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan. All right, next up we have Project Wide Awake or Sentinels, which I like more than Master Mold. I like that this is basically an improved upon collector mechanic where if you use an ally for chump blocking, right, it goes under that side scheme, and if there's, I don't know what it is, 3 or 4 of them under there, that you lose the game. I think that's cool. I like what they're kind of doing with the side schemes and make it a little more interesting. There's definitely more scheming involved with this Project Wide Awake versus Master Mold, where it's more damage because there's a lot more like Sentinels you have to deal with in Master Mold. There's some in Project Wide Awake, but not a ton. But yeah, I like that mechanic. I think they learned from the collector mistakes and they made a better version of it. I think this is a better version. Like, you have to pay attention to it, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So I like it. It's not bad. It's probably in between like a lot and not bad. So I think it's fun, it's fair, all that stuff. But it's something where I don't play as much because it's still, you just kind of have to beat up on the Sentinels, and like as long as you beat up on the Sentinels, like again, you're gonna be good. Like there's no interesting twist to the mechanic in the sense that like there's something else you have to do, which is fine because it's like the second villain in the box, so it shouldn't be too complicated. But the twist just isn't there, I guess, is what I should say, and it's fine, right? It's fine. It's not bad. But I do like it for what it is, and I'm happy they improved upon the collector mechanic. It's probably something I need to play more of, but I just the similarities between that and Master Mold are just not. It's not even that they're similar. It's like thematically they're kind of similar, and it's almost a little like too much for me. So it just feels like I'm kind of thematically playing the same thing again, which kind of stinks. Because I do think Sentinels is a pretty decent scenario that I should get to the table more often. All right, next up we have Red Skull. Red Skull is good. I like Red Skull a lot. I think if if you have a hero that can scheme a decent amount in solo, Red Skull is pretty easy, right? You just have to control the side scheme deck and then slowly work away his life. Now, an expert, it's a bit harder. He is a pretty challenging expert villain, I will say that. But on standard, again, with a hero that like can thwart some, it's not the worst thing in the world. He's not the hardest villain in the world. But I still like his design. I still think it's neat having like the side scheme deck. I think that's cool. Maybe they'll do something again like that in the future. I don't know. But I do like him a lot. I do think it's fun. And he still holds up well, being the first big box expansion. I mean, the design still holds up really well. So I like Red Skull. Now, on the flip side is Rhino, who I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan because it's not designed well for solo, because he can scheme out the main scheme really easily. You basically either have to rush Rhino and hope you don't get an advance, or you have to play Justice at this point and put a Space Van on his main scheme to give you a little more breathing room. I think what I really don't like about Rhino is that because when we originally just had the core box and that was it, it taught a lot of solo players not to flip down, because if you flip down, you lost the game, almost guaranteed, right? Lost the game. So it taught a lot of solo players to like never flip down. And for me, that kind of messed up like playing well for a long time because I was afraid to flip down all the time. I'd rather just, keep getting punched in the face. So I think I still get annoyed by Rhino because of that. Now, again, I've played him somewhat now and again. I think on Expert, he's actually a really good challenge for multiplayer. Like, he's really good challenge. He's really fun in Expert for multiplayer. But for solo, I don't know. It is not for me. Now, if he randomly gets drawn, that's fine in like a game of marbles. But generally speaking, I'm just not that big of a fan of Rhino. It kind of ruined Alter Ego a long time for me, and I'm just gonna hold him to those feelings of just resentment. All right, then we have the other Green Goblin from there was Mutant Formula earlier on. The other one's Risky Business, where I like Risky Business. Like, I'm gonna put not bad like in the middle here. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's a super easy scenario. It's like the easiest scenario in the world. I still don't think it's like the easiest scenario. Like, you still have to like pay attention, and there are times, especially in solo, where you just get like, because there's only 2 counters on the side. So basically, right, he flips between Norman Osborn and Green Goblin, and on the side there's I think it's only 2 counters, if I remember correctly, that basically like he can flip back down to his other side really easily. And you don't want him to be on his other side. You need him to be on the Green Goblin side or whatever. So I think the fact that those counters can drop kind of easily and you have to time things right. Like if you time things right and you figure all that, like yeah, he's not like hard, right? He's not hard, but there's still like a challenge there. There still can be a challenge there at least. And on expert, I still think there's a challenge there. So I actually like it. I like the system of Norman Osborn to Green Goblin. Like I like that theme to it. I think that's a lot of fun. I think it's cool. And again, yes, he can be easier on standard if nothing flips when it's not supposed to. But when things start like kind of going awry, like you still have to like figure it out a little bit. Like I don't know. I've seen a lot of people make the argument that's the easiest scenario in the game. I disagree. Like I disagree. I still think Absorbing Man is way easier. Like way, 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 way easier. And who else would be really easy? I guess Risky Business would be. Oh well, like the Hood, I still think is pretty easy. And I think there's certain strategies for other people that like make things really easy. But yeah, I don't know. I still feel like Risky is just like it gets this rep as like being like the easiest thing in the world. And I still, again, it's not that it's hard. I don't want to say it's hard. I just don't think it's the easiest thing in the world on solo. I think when you have more players in multiplayer and the counters don't bounce around as much, maybe it's better and easier. But yeah, on solo, again, it's not that it's hard. I just don't think it's like the easiest thing in the world. I think Master Mold is easier than Risky Business is because Magneto ally is so incredibly strong. So anyway, there's just my thoughts. But I think he's not bad. Regardless, he's not bad. He's fine. He's in the middle. So then we have Ronan. Ronan forever goes down as like Ronan will forever go down as just like the worst villain in the sense that there was so much hype after the Red Skull box because it was so well done that people had really high expectations for Guardians of the Galaxy and it flopped. Like it's not a good box, generally speaking. There's very few redeeming qualities of that box. What I will say is Ronan, I don't mind as much now. I don't think he's the hardest villain anymore. I don't think he's the most annoying villain anymore. I think other villains have taken that mantle. For me, I will still randomly play Ronan, and like enjoy it. I think Ronan, the best strategy is still a rush strategy with Ronan. I know people have played longer games against Ronan and figured it out and done a really good job. I don't think I'm that good yet. But if you rush against Ronan, especially on standard, a 3 rush strategy with like a Star-Lord or Captain Marvel or who else is there that for rush? Well, those are the big ones. I know Star-Lord. Star-Lord can like take out Ronan somewhat easily on a three turn rush strategy. So you could do that pretty easily. Captain Marvel can take him out. I feel like there's someone else I'm missing. But there are certain villains or certain heroes that are really, really, really good at rushing that could take out Ronan somewhat easily. So again, he's not that he's an easy villain, but that's like your best strategy. The longer it goes, the harder the Ronan fight becomes, unfortunately. So I'll still randomly play him because I don't mind the challenge. The card pool is big enough where we got some strong cards like and some good rushers. Oh, and like Wolverine. Wolverine can take him out in a pretty fast strategy too. So there's heroes that can take him out pretty quick. If the game gets too long, I feel like Ronan gets the advantage. It's just not worth it. On expert, he's not great. Like, he's still doable, but it's very, very hard. So I still enjoy him more. I still think Loki is a more annoying and boring villain. And I still think, well, we'll get into the harder one in a little bit, but I still think there's a villain that's harder than Ronan. All right, now we have Sabertooth, who he's not bad. He's up there, not bad. I like the idea of the healing mechanic. Like, I think that's cool where you flip the top card in the encounter deck, and for each boost icon, he heals a little bit. Like, I think that's a fun, interesting mechanic. I think it's pretty cool. I think if you rush against him, he's a much easier villain to be, and protection works really well. As long as Robert Kelly, like, you know, the person you're supposed to be saving, like, isn't taking damage, you'll be fine. It can be drawn out a little bit depending if he heals a lot. Like, if he heals a lot, it becomes this longer and longer fight, which I get can be annoying on solo. But I still like the design. Like, I still think it's cool. It's not bad. I just think if you rush him, it's a super easy way to beat him. Like, super easy way to beat him. So that's my only like real complaint against them. But other than that, as long as you're playing like either a rush or a protection strategy where you're able to defend to make sure, or just defend somewhat so that Robert Kelly doesn't take all the damage. I think he's more manageable. So I like the design. I think he's fun. I just don't play him as much as I used to. All right, now we have Sandman, who Sandman's not bad. I think Sandman taught a lot of people indirect damage, and I'm forever thankful to Sandman for that. But like, he's fine. He's interesting enough. It's just like I like the design. I like the idea. I'm happy it happened. But I feel like now it's just kind of dull. Like, it's okay. He's a normal villain, but he does indirect damage instead of like direct damage. Okay, that's the idea. And again, he's the first villain of the Spider-Man box. So like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, he should have been like much more interesting, but like that's not the case. But it is one of those things where, I don't know, like once you like get his mechanic and you figure it out, and with the Sandman tokens and like keeping that under control, he's fine. Right? He's fine. He's not bad. I do need to play him some more in the expert. I don't think I've done that a lot recently, but yeah, he's fine. He's, to me, like just a perfect, not bad, right in the middle, pretty standard villain. So I'm gonna put him kind of right in the middle of everything. All right, next up we have Spiral, who Spiral's not bad. I think she's better than Mojo. Um, and I like the idea of that she's like hopping around. You have to like figure it out with the side scheme, and you can either thwart off the side scheme or you could just take damage. And I like the option, but once you learn to just kind of plow through that side scheme until she's cornered, and you just like attack her really hard. I think on standard she's pretty easy. On expert she's more of a challenge. Actually, let me bump this up. Yeah, I'm gonna move her up here. I think she's more up here. I think over time she'll actually get better than Magog, because I think Magog is getting kind of boring. But with Spiral on expert, especially on expert, she's really interesting and she's really fun. She's really tough because like the counter's lower. I think on standard it's 3 Spiral counters, so like you get like what, three of her attacks to before she disappears, and then on expert it's like 2, which 2 makes it really interesting for solo. So I really like that. I really, really, really like that mechanic for expert, and she's a really hard challenge. So I appreciate that. On standard, I think she's a little too easy, but I like the mechanics, right? I like the way she works. I think is fun. I think it's really neat. So she's up there. I think she'll move up. I do need to play her more. It's been a while. Like, I've only played her a handful of times since she's come out, or not since she's come out. I played her a bunch when she came out, and I stopped for a really long time. And then since then, I've only played a handful of times. So I think if I play her more, she'll probably be up to like a lot. But she's a solid villain. She's a very solid villain. All right, then we have Taskmaster, who like he's not bad. The problem is his getting out the allies is like the most crucial thing. As long as you get out the other allies, you're probably pretty good, at least 1 or 2 of them. But he's not super difficult. Again, he's a villain that you don't want to pop down the alter ego and up a lot, because you just draw the top card of the deck and he deals damage to you, which stinks. So you don't want to like flip a lot on him. So once you flip up, you kind of just want to keep just destroying him. So long as you have like a somewhat well balanced hero, you should be pretty good. And his mechanics are fine. Mimicry is still like, or not mimicry. No, maybe mimicry and telegraphic or telephotogenic or whatever it's called, where like you just have to put damage on it and that's it. Like, that was like one of the first cards to do that, if I remember correctly, which still is like an annoying card, right? You have a big hit, but like he just absorbs it, and that's frustrating. But he's still like, he's fine, right? He's not bad. He's fine for what he is. Nothing too great, but not bad still. He for his age, he still held up well, which I think is pretty cool. All right, then we have Thanos, who I like Thanos' design a lot. I think he's a lot of fun. I think, once again, he's a fair villain. He's very hard, but he's fair. You need to have a good deck, even on standard, to beat him, but you can beat him. I think on expert, he's really hard. I think he's really tough on expert, but with an exceptionally good deck, you can beat him. I think the hardest thing with solo is that he is stalwart, and in solo, you want to be stunning or confusing as many enemies as possible. It's the biggest advantage you can have in a solo game. And you can't do that against Thanos. So you have to approach him different ways. And he just has so much life. He has so much life. So I really like the design. I think with the Infinity Gauntlet, it makes a lot of sense with him. We talked a bit about this with Loki. But it makes a lot of sense with him. he's one of the highlights of that box. He would be the best villain in that box if it wasn't for Hela. But I like Thanos' design a lot. I think, again, it falls in that category where he's hard like Magneto, but fair. And I appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. I really like Thanos. So big fan of Thanos. I think he's always been kind of up there, and I think he'll stay up there. He's just a good challenge. Then we have the Hood, who, like, I don't know. I'll randomly play him. I don't like getting out 8 modular sets. Like, that's just not as much fun and shuffling them in. Like, I think it's a cool idea. I think the Hood is just a little too weak, right? As long as like you as long as you just play like a solid game, like he's not that bad. Now, again, I get that he could be harder based on what modular sets you put in, which, okay, that's fine. That's fair. That's a cool enough mechanic. But it's just, I just don't want to get out 8 modular sets or 7 modular sets, whatever it is. I don't want to do that. Like, it's just, that's not enjoyable. That's not fun to me. It takes too long, and the payoff isn't there, right? Like, he still feels like he's on the easier side as long as I control like side schemes and minions that come out there. I feel like I'll be fine. So, um, it's fine. I'll randomly play him. It's just something I don't play that often, unfortunately. I still think he's worth getting for the standard 2 card set, but he's just not a villain that like I love or anything like that. All right, next up, it's a picture of Proxima Midnight, but this is tower defense. Tower defense is not bad, right? Tower defense, once you figure out basically what is it, Proxima, you want to take the extra damage from and not deal damage onto the tower. And Corvus Glaive, I think you just have to like make sure it's not undefended. Like, you're probably good, right? And keep the main schemes in check. You don't want them to pop. As long as you do that, like it's fine, right? It's not that hard of a scenario. I still think it's a fun design. It's cool. But it's one of those things that I've played so much now that I've kind of just like figured it out. So it's not bad, but it's not great. It's kind of easy at this point. And expert's a little bit more of a challenge. I probably should play expert more on it, but on standard, it's just a little too easy, a little too straightforward at this point. So it's a fine scenario. It's not bad, but it's at the bottom, not bad for me. Next up, we have Ultron, who I like Ultron a lot. I like him a little less than Klaw. The reason being is because it's gotten easier. There's more cards like, what is it, on aggression, like 1x1, where like you deal 2 damage to enemy. If you defeat the enemy, you deal 2 damage to a different one. Like, there's a lot of cards like that now, or cards that can like do 1 damage or whatever, that takes out his drones pretty fast, and that's what makes Ultron interesting, is his drones. Now, I still like Ultron for the challenge. I still think he's a fair challenge. I still think he's fun, but there's so many ways to kind of keep him in check that he's not as hard as he used to be. He also, I think, taught people that you need to read the text box all the time, because every single version of Ultron changes, and I think that's kind of cool, right? I think that's neat that it's not just like the same mechanic. Like Klaw is always, you just draw 2 cards and like add a little bit onto it. Ultron's like every single stage is like completely different than the previous stage, so you have to like read the cards carefully and pay attention to it. But yeah, I think he still holds up pretty well, but he's definitely gotten easier over time. There's a lot of things that can help keep him in check, just including the Hawkeye ally in leadership, right? Just like, that's huge. That's a huge card against them. So he's still tough, but he's definitely getting easier, and so less interesting overall. All right, Venom Goblin. I think, so personally, I think Venom Goblin is the hardest villain in the game. I think he's harder than Ronan. I think there's a lot to keep track of with the main schemes. Plus, he could do a lot of damage. Plus, he gets some really bad attachments. Plus, he has so many bad cards, and there's so much to keep track of that there are, I don't know, a quarter to maybe half the heroes in the game for solo will probably never beat Venom Goblin, because you have to be so well-rounded. Now, well-rounded heroes can do pretty well against him, right? Can hold their own, but you have to be so well-rounded against Venom. Or Venom Goblin. He's so tough, and I like it, and I'll still play it. But it's like demoralizing sometimes, because you will just get like annihilated sometimes, which stinks. So that part's not great. But I still think he's more. I think he's somewhat fair, but he's very, very hard. He's very hard. Ronan can just surge his way to just killing you, which is why I put Ronan a bit lower on this list. But generally speaking, like Venom Goblin just he's fine. He's fine, but he's very, very hard. I still think he's the hardest villain in the game, but he's fine for what he is. But it's not a villain that I will go play a ton. Maybe I should play him more. But I just feel like, again, there's half the heroes like just don't stand a chance against him, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't mind him. He's probably at the top of randomly may play it, in the bottom of not bad. He's probably going to be in there somewhere. But yeah, he's just tough. He's just tough. All right, so next up we have Venom, where that has the whole bell chime counter thing. Once you kind of get what you want to do with that, you just want to put as many chime counters as possible on it before it flips. So you just got to do like a massive attack onto it, keep it on that side as long as possible, and then not take damage. Like, you kind of figure it out. So he's not bad. Like, I like the mechanics of Venom. Like, I think it's fine, but I don't think it's anything awesome, right? It's fine. I think he's a very fine villain overall. I think he's a bit more interesting than some others that are in this list, so that's why he's higher up there. But I think with the chime counters, like, once you understand, you want to put as many chime counters in there as possible. So if you get like a big attack the bell, so that when it flips, you have a lot of chime counters to work with, because him taking 1 additional damage on each attack can be a lot. That could be 3 or 4 extra damage each round if you time it out right. And then as long as you're making sure that you're not taking any damage to lower the chime counters, like, you're good. And even if you do, like, hopefully you put enough chime counters on there that one whole attack is absorbed by the chime counters, but the bell doesn't flip back down, right? So that's the rough idea of what you want to do. So anyway, once you figure that out, he's not as hard and not as bad, but he's all right. Then we have the Wrecking Crew, and the Wrecking Crew is like there. Yes, Wrecking Crew is very easy. Yes, it's not as exciting or whatever, but it's on expert. I think it's still a challenge. I still think it's all right, and I still like it more than Ronan. That's for sure. I know a lot of people give Wrecking Crew a hard time as like being the worst scenario pack, and it is. I mean, it is the worst scenario pack. I would rank it below the Hood. It's just a little too easy and straightforward. Now, again, I have Kang lower because Kang, I think, for solo is just not fun. But I recognize that for 2 and up players, Kang is a lot more fun, right? It's just for solo specific. Kang will be lower. But I would still recommend for the average Marvel Champions player that you buy Kang over Wrecking Crew. But Wrecking Crew, like, I know it gets a lot of hate, and I think it's fine, right? Again, there is a certain order you want to destroy the Wrecking Crew in, and there's certain villains that you want to attack you versus others. Once you learn that, it becomes a much easier scenario. I agree with those assessments, but I still enjoy that it starts off with the 4 villains and each one has a deck and whatnot. Like, I still think that's fun. I think that's interesting. I think that's cool. So I appreciate the design. I hope they update it and do a newer version of the Wrecking Crew at some point. That's more like, again, the 4 villains staying out there right in the beginning. Like, I think there's a lot they could do with that design space nowadays. So I hope they do that again at some point. All right, last but not least is Zola, who I think is harder than Red Skull, for sure. And I like him a lot, right? He's in here a lot, or he's in here somewhere. I don't know where in here, but he's in here. Can we zoom in one last time on the screen? There we go. So he's definitely in this area. So I like Zola. I think Zola is a fun challenge. I think there's certain, if you're playing a hero where you just kind of like do small amounts of damage, like War Machine, Zola doesn't really make sense, right? Zola is a really, really tough villain. But I think in general, like, I think his design is pretty cool. You have to be able to handle minions. The test counter thing is cool enough. He's very hard, but again, he's fair, which I think is for me the most important thing. I don't mind hard villains. I just want fair villains. So anyway, looking through this list, or anyway, Zola, like a lot, probably right in the middle. Looking through this list now, I think I'm pretty good. This could be jumbled up a little bit, the not bad category. Like maybe Taskmaster's a little bit better than Sandman. Maybe this would actually drop down a little bit. Drang, I think, is fine. Mojo, yeah, it's fine there. Yeah, like this is all fine. Not a fan. Actually, I might put Kang over Nebula. Collector 2 is still there. That's fine. Or Collector 1, sorry. Collector 2 is up here, which is fine. Yeah, this all looks good. I mean, again, you might switch like a card here or there, but as far as like the tier categories go, I think this is pretty solid. This is where I would rank them. So it'll also go like in order, just to reiterate, left to right for each line. All right, so that's my entire tier list. Hopefully you enjoy videos like this. Let me know down in the comments where you would rank different villains, or it could just be your top 5 villains or your 5 least favorite villains, or whatever you want to do. Make sure to put that there. And if you're interested in seeing my hero tier list, I'll put it right here. Just click on the video right here. You can see the entire hero tier list. If you made it to the end of this video, make sure to hit like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It really helps out the channel. See you all next time.